piano music. Let's do a long video so we can go big time. It's a little louder than I thought it'd be. I think I'm pretty quiet actually. Let's turn that up. Alright, guys, can you hear me? Lemonhead, yell at me in chat if you can hear me or not. Turn that up. You listen to my echo real quick. Guys, can you hear me? Lemonhead, yell at me in chat. Alright, I think you guys can hear me. Alright, now. Alright, we big boys. That's images. I gotta go to PDF, because... Alright, now I'm gonna start reading the Communist Manifesto. Now, the reason why I didn't buy a paperback copy is because the whole point of communism is to, you know, get everything for free. So I'm reading this off the internet for free. PDF, because I'm just gonna listen to Echo again, make sure I'm loud enough. Alright, so I feel like I'm loud enough. You guys, I don't, yeah, you know, who cares? Also, I gotta edit stream real quick. Alright. I don't know who you are, but I'm reading the Communist Manifesto, Mr. 1TB Cousins, as I said I would. Alright, screw you, Matt. Screw you, I can't go any louder, okay? Just turn it up. Alright, screw you, Matt. Alright, so we gotta skip to the table of contents, page 14, because the rest of it is just, you know, filler. It's Bailey. Oh, hi, Bailey, I'm reading the Communist Manifesto. Alright, here we go. Manifesto of the Communist Party. A specter is haunting Europe. The specter of communism. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise the specter. Pope and Tsar Metternich and Guizot, French radicals and German police spies. Where is the party in opposition that has not been decried as communistic by its opponents in power? Where is the opposition that has not hurled back the branding reproach of communism against the more advanced opposition parties, as well as against its reactionary adversaries? The two things result from this fact. It is high time that oh, I already messed up. Change to creative. Well, fine, I'll change to creative. I was in gaming talk shows, so you might have to refresh. But now I'm creative, you know, whatever. Alright, two things result from this fact. Communism is already acknowledged by all European powers to be itself a power. It is high time that communists should openly, in the face of the whole world, publish their views, their aims, their tendencies, and meet this nursery tale of the specter of communism with a manifesto of the party itself. To this end, communists of various nationalities assembled in London and sketched the following manifesto, to be published in the English, French, German, Italian, Flemish, and Danish languages. Read better. Shut up. You're black. You can't read. Wait, no, that's offensive. I got a follow, but follows aren't working, so I'm gonna take a guess as that was Bailey. I'm done. Bye. Thanks, honey. I could real quick add something. What was it? Browser source? Add existing alerts. Yes. Yep. Alright. Yoink. Yeah, that was Bailey. Have that up in the corner there. Alright, back to the Communist Manifesto. Alright, Chapter 1. Bourgeoisie and Proletarians. The history of all hitherto... That's a fucking... oh, I already swore this is Schoology, I'm sorry. All of that's something hetero. Existing society is the history of class struggles. Free man and slave, patrician and plebeian. Plebeian. Lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition of one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight. A fight that each time ended either in a revolutionary reconstitution of a society at large, or in the common ruin of contending classes. Also, shut up, Jacob. I'm reading the Communist Manifesto. Alright. In the earlier epochs of history, we find almost everywhere a complicated arrangement of society into various orders, a manifold gradation of social rank. In ancient Rome, we have patricians. Holy crap, these are some big words. Knights, plebeians, slaves in the Middle Ages, feudal lords. In the Middle Ages, feudal lords, vassals, guildmasters, journeymen, apprentices, serfs, and in almost all these classes, again, subordinate gradations. Gradations. The modern bourgeoisie society that has sprouted from the ruins of feudal society has not done away with class antagonisms. It has established new classes, new conditions of oppression, new forms of struggle in place of the old ones. You know, this is definition of bourgeoisie and other things. Our epoch, the epoch of bourgeoisie, possesses, however, the distinct feature. It has simplified class antagonism. Society as a whole is more and more splitting up into two great hostile camps. Into two great classes directly facing each other, the bourgeoisie and proletariat. From the serfs of the Middle Ages sprang the chartered burghers, that looks like burgers, of earliest towns from these burgesses. Yeah, burgesses. The first elements of bourgeoisie were developed. The discovery of America, the rounding of the Cape, opened up fresh ground for the rising of the bourgeoisie. I looked at my phone for 2 seconds and I forgot where I was. I said something about bourgeoisie. Chinese. Okay. The East Indian and Chinese markets, the colonialization of America, trade with the colonies, the increase in means of exchange and the commodities in general gave to commerce, to navigation, to industry, an impulse never before known, and thereby the revolutionary element in tottering feudal society a rapid development. The feudal system of industry, in which industrial production was monopolized by closed guilds, now no longer sufficed for the growing wants of the new markets. The manufacturing system took its place. The guild masters were pushed on one side by the manufacturing middle class. Y'all are being mean to each other in chat. Where was I? The feudal system of industry, closed guilds. Yeah, the feudal system of industry in which industrial production is monopolized by closed guilds no longer suffice for the growing wants of new markets. The manufacture system took its place. The guildmasters pushed on. I already read this. Between different corporate guilds vanished in the face of division of labor in each single workshop. Meantime, the markets kept ever growing, the demand ever rising. Even manufacture no longer sufficed. Thereupon, steam and machinery revolutionized industrial production. The place of manufacture is taken by giant modern industry. The place of the industrial middle class by industrial millionaires, the leaders of the whole industrial armies, the modern bourgeoisie. Wait, I can't read. I keep forgetting where I am. Modern industry has established the world market for which the discovery of America paved the way. This market has given immense development to the commerce, to navigation, to communication by land. This development has, in its turn, reacted on the extension of industry. And in... I keep looking at chat and keep getting confused. I'm just going to full screen this. We know that from the development has, in its turn, reacted on the extension of industry and a proportion as industry. Proportion as industry, commerce, navigation, railways extended. In the same proportion, the bourgeoisie developed, increased its capital, and pushed it into the background every class handed down from the Middle Ages. We, therefore, how the modern bourgeoisie is itself the product of a long course of development, of a series of revolutionary in the modes of production and of exchange. I'm on page. I've only read 2 pages. Jesus Christ, this is gonna be a struggle. We see, therefore, how the modern bourgeoisie itself, the product of a long course of development and series of revolutions in the modes of production and of exchange. Each step in the development of the bourgeoisie was accompanied by a corresponding political advance of that class, an oppressed class under the sway of a feudal nobility and armed and self-governing association of the medieval commune. Here, independent urban republic, as in Italy and Germany, they are taxable. Third estate of a monarchy, as in France, afterwards, in the period of manufacturing proper, serving either the semi-feudal or absolute monarchy as a counterpoise in against the nobility. Counterpoise? I don't know. This is like French, Russian at the same time, English. Against the nobility, and in fact, cornerstone of the great monarchies in general, the bourgeoisie has at last, since the establishment of modern industry and the world market, conquered for itself and the modern representative state exclusively political sway. The executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie historically has played the most revolutionary part. The bourgeoisie, wherever it has gotten the upper hand, has put an end to feudal patriarchal idyllic relations. It has pitilessly torn asunder the motley feudal ties that bound a man to his natural superiors, and has remaining no other nexus between man and man than naked self-interest, than callous cash payment. It has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervor and chivalrous enthusiasm, of Philistine sentimentalism in icy water of egotistical calculation. It has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and in place of the numberless infeasible chartered freedoms has set up a single unconscious freedom: free trade. In one word, for exploitation, violed by religious and political institution, it has substituted naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. The bourgeoisie has stripped of its halo every occupation. Hit hetero. I'm just gonna say hetero. It says hit herto. There's probably like a weird way of saying that, but I'm stupid, so yay. I accidentally did a thing again. The bourgeoisie of stripped hit hetero, honored and looked up to with reverent awe. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science into paid wage laborers. The bourgeoisie has torn away from the family of sentimental veil. It has reduced the family relation to a mere money relation. The bourgeoisie has disclosed how it came to pass the brutal display of vigor in the Middle Ages, which reactionaries so much admire, found its fitting very compliment in the most slothful indolence. It has been first to show what a man's activity can bring out. It has accomplished wonders far surpassing Egyptian pyramids, Roman aqueducts, and Gothic cathedrals. It has conducted expeditions to put in the shade of all former exoduses of nations and crusades. I'm gonna need some water for this. Sorry. The bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production and thereby relations of production, and with them the whole relations of society. Conservation of the old modes of productions in unaltered form was, on the contrary, the first condition of existence from all earlier industrial classes. Constant revolutionizing of production, uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions, everlasting uncertainty, and agitation distinguish the bourgeoisie epoch from all the earlier ones. All fixed, vast, frozen relations, with their train of ancient and venerable prejudices and opinions, are swept away. All new formed ones become antiquated before they can ossify. All that is solid melts into air. All that is holy profaned, and a man is at last compelled to face with sober senses his real conditions of life and his relations with kind. Scrolling. The need of a constantly expanding market for its product chases the bourgeoisie over the entire surface of the globe. It must nestle everywhere, settle everywhere, establish connections everywhere. They spelled connections with an X. The bourgeoisie has, through its exploitation of the world market, given a cosmopolitan character to production consumption in every country. Oh, to great charge of reactionists, it has drawn from under the feed industry the national ground on which it stood. All old established national industries have been destroyed or are daily being destroyed. They are dislodged by new industries whose introduction becomes a life and death question for all civilized nations. By industries that no longer work up indigenous raw material, but raw material drawn from the remotest zones. Industries whose products are consumed not only at home, but in every quarter of the globe. In place of old wants satisfied by production of every country, we must find new wants requiring for their satisfaction of products of distant lands and climes. In place of the old local and national seclusions of self-sufficiency, we have intercourse in every direction, universal interdependence of nations. And as in material, so also in intellectual production. The intellectual creations of individual nations become common property. National one-sidedness and narrow-mindedness become more and more impossible. And from the numerous national and local literatures, there arises a world literature. The bourgeoisie, by rapid improvement of all instruments of production, by immensely facilitated means of communications, you must seize the means of production. XD, don't you dare, resident sleeper me. I am reading this through all of my effort, okay? Sorry. Facilitated means of communication draws all, even the most barbarian nations into civilization. The cheap prices of commodities are the heavy artillery with which it batters down all Chinese walls. With which it forces the barbarians, intensely obstinate of hatred of foreigners, to capitulate. It compels all nations of extinction to adopt bourgeoisie mode of production. It compels them to introduce what it calls civilization into their midst, i.e., to become bourgeoisie themselves. In one word, it creates after its own image. The bourgeoisie has subjected to the country its own rule of the towns. It has created enormous cities, has greatly increased urban population. Oh, we got a fat follow. Whom was this? I'm a reptile. Thanks for the fat follow. You enjoying the live reading of the Communist Manifesto? I know I sure am. Holy crap, it all broke after that one. Full screen. Twitch over here. That's enough of that. So just as it made the country dependent on the towns, so it has made barbarian and semi-barbarian countries dependent on the civilized ones. Nations of peasants on nations of bourgeoisie. The East on the West. The bourgeoisie keeps more and more doing away with the scattered state of population of the the bourgeoisie keeps more and more doing away with the scattered state of population of the means of production and of property. It has agglomerated population, centralized the means of production, and has concentrated property in few hands. The necessary consequence of this was political centralization. Independent or but loosely connected provinces with a separate interest, laws, governments, and systems of taxation become lumped together into one nation with one government, one code of laws, one national class interest, one frontier, and one customs tariff. When's the next chapter over? Holy, I don't know what I was getting into. The bourgeoisie, during its rule of scarce 100 years, has created more massive and more colossal productive forces than of all the preceding nations together. Subjection of nations' forces to man, machinery, application of chemistry to industry, agriculture, steam navigation, railways, electric telegraphs, clearing of whole continents for cultivation, canalization of rivers, whole populations conjured out of the ground. What earlier century had even a the text is cut off. Presentiment that such productive forces slumbered in the lap of social labor. We see, then, the means of production and of exchange on whose foundation the bourgeoisie built itself up were generated in a feudal society. Generated in a feudal society. Feudalated in a central society. Generated. I also can't read. At a certain stage in development of these means of production and exchange, the conditions under which feudal society produced and exchanged the feudal organization of agriculture and manufacturing industry. In one word, the feudal relations of property became no longer compatible with the already developed productive forces. They became so many fetters. They had to be burst asunder. They were burst asunder. Into their place stepped free competition, accompanied by social and political constitution adapted in it. The economic and political sway of the bourgeoisie class. A similar movement is going on before our own eyes. Modern bourgeoisie society, with its relations of production and exchange of property, a society that has conjured up such a gigantic means of production and exchange, is like the sorcerer who is no longer able to control the powers of the netherworld, Minecraft, XD, whom has called upon by his spells. For many a decade past, the history of industry and commerce is but the history of the revolt of modern productive forces against modern conditions of production, against the property relations that are the conditions for the existence of the bourgeoisie and of its rule. It is enough to mention commercial crises that have more threateningly in these crises a great part of not only existing productions, but also of the previously created productive forces are periodically destroyed. I messed that one up too. In these crises, there break out an epidemic that, in all earlier epochs, would have seemed an absurdity. The epidemic of overproduction. Society suddenly finds itself put back into a state of momentary barbarism. It appears as if a famine, a universal war of devastation, had cut off the supply of every means of subsistence, industry, I should just restart. It had to cut off supply of every means of subsistence. Industry and commerce seemed to be destroyed. And why? Because there is too much civilization, too much of substance, too much industry, too much commerce. The productive forces at the disposal of society no longer tend to further the development of the conditions of the bourgeoisie property. On the contrary, they have become too powerful for these conditions, by which they are fettered, and so soon they overcome these fetters. They bring disorder into a whole world of bourgeoisie society, endanger the existence of bourgeoisie property, endanger the existence of bourgeoisie property. The conditions of the bourgeoisie society are too narrow to compromise the wealth created by them. And how does the bourgeoisie get over these crises? On one hand, by enforced destruction of mass productive forces. On the other hand, by the conquest of new markets, by the more thorough exploitation of old ones. What, Chris? I'm reading the Communist Manifesto. I told you this earlier. Jeez. Such uncultured swines, not knowing I'm reading the Communist Manifesto. As I say, by paving the way for more extensive and more destructive crises, and by diminishing the means of whereby crises are prevented. I'm gonna grab some water. I'll be back in a hot sec. Alright, I have returned to continue reading. The Communist Manifesto. We're about 25 minutes in. 5 of that minutes was just me preparing it, and we've read like 4 pages. So, buckle up, buckaroo. Whereby crises are prevented. The weapons with which the bourgeoisie felled feudalism to the ground are now turned against the bourgeoisie itself. But not only has the bourgeoisie forged these weapons that bring death to itself. It has also called into existence the men who are to wield those weapons, the modern working class, the proletarians, stupid words. In proportion as the bourgeoisie, i.e. capital, is developed, in the same proportion is the proletariat, the modern working class, developed, a class of laborers who live only so long as they find work, and who find work only so long as their labor increases capital. These laborers, who must sell themselves piecemeal, are a commodity, like every other article of commerce, and are consequently exposed to all the vicissitudes of competition, to all the fluctuations in the market, owing to expensive use of machinery and to the division of labor. The work of the proletarians has lost all individual character and consequently all charm for the workmen. I'm gonna see when chapter 2 happens. Page 22. Okay. Wait, there is a whole lot more. Oh my god. Alright. Was I on page... The principles of I was on page 18, I believe. He becomes an appendage of the machine, and it is only the most simple, most monotonous, and most easily acquired knack that is required of him. Hence, the cost of production of a workman is restricted almost entirely to the means of subsistence that he requires for maintenance and for the propagation of his race. But the price of a commodity, and therefore also of labor, is equal to the wage of the cost of production in proportion, therefore, as repulsiveness. Wait, did I mess that up? But the price of a commodity, and therefore also of labor, is equal to the cost of production, in proportion, therefore, as the repulsiveness of the work increases, the wage decreases. Nay, more, in proportion of the use of machinery and division of labor increases, the same proportion of the burden of toil also increases, whether by prolongation of the working hours, by increase of the work exacted in a given time, or increased speed of machinery, etc. The modern industry has converted the little workshop of the patriarchal master into a great factory of the industrial capitalist. Capitalist scum! Anyway, hierarchy. Masses of laborers crowded into the factory, organized like soldiers as privates of the industrial army. They are placed under the command of a perfect hierarchy of officers and sergeants. Not only are they slaves of the bourgeoisie class and of the bourgeoisie state, they are daily and hourly enslaved by the machine, by overlooker, and above all, the individual bourgeoisie manufacturer himself. The more openly the despotism proclaims gain to be its end and aim, the more petty and more hateful of the embittering it is. The less skill and exertion of strength implied in manual labor. In other words, the more modern industry becomes developed, the more is the labor of the men suspended by that of women. Differences of age and sex have no longer any distinctive social validity for the working class. All instruments of labor more or less expensive to use according to their age and sex. Yes, quite. This is indeed a glorious reading of the Communist Manifesto. Throat hurts a little bit. No sooner is the exploitation of the labor by the manufacturer so far at an end that he receives the wages in cash that he is sent upon by other portions of the bourgeoisie, the landlord, the shopkeeper, the pawnbroker, etc., etc. The lower strata of the middle class, the small tradespeople, shopkeepers, and retired tradesmen, generally the handcraftsmen and peasants, all these sink gradually into proletariat, partly because their diminutive capital does not suffice for the scale on which modern industry is carried on, and is swamped in the competition with the large capitalists, partly because their specialized skill is rendered worthless by new methods of production. Thus, the proletariat is recruited from all classes of the population. The proletariat goes through various stages of development. With its birth begins its struggle with the bourgeoisie. At first, the contest is carried out on individual laborers, then by the work people of a factory, then by the operative of one trade. trade, and one locally against the individual bourgeoisie who directly exploits them. The direction their attacks not the direction they direct their attacks not against the bourgeoisie conditions of production, but against the instruments of production themselves. They destroy imported wares that compete with their labor. They smash to pieces machinery. They set factories ablaze. They seek to restore by force vanished status of workmen of the Middle Ages. At this stage, laborers still form an incoherent mass scattered over the whole country, and broken up by their mutual competition. If anywhere, they unite to form more compact bodies. This is not yet the consequence of their own active union, but of the union of the bourgeoisie, in which class, in order to attain its own political ends, is compelled to set the whole proletariat in motion, and moreover yet for a time able to do so. At this stage, therefore, the proletarians do not fight their enemies, but the enemies of their enemies, the remnant of absolute monarchy, the landowners, the non-industrial bourgeoisie, the petty bourgeoisie. Thus, the whole historical movement is concentrated in the hands of the bourgeoisie. Every victory so obtained is a victory for the bourgeoisie. Did you hear that, guys? You're all fighting for the bourgeoisie. Come on now, stop fighting for the bourgeoisie. Rise up. I think I'm gonna stop reading at part 2 and just do it as in like chapters. Like read it up through the whole weekend. I lost what page I am. I was on page like 19 or something. Yeah. Scare over the whole country, massive industry, victory, victory, victory. Where is that? Ah, found it. Okay. How y'all doing in Twitch chat tonight? Screw those nutbags. Yes. Thank you. I'm gonna take a hot break, take a sip of water, and continue reading. But with the development of industry, the proletariat not only increases in number, it becomes concentrated in greater masses. Its strength grows, and it feels that strength more. The various interests and conditions of life within the ranks of the proletariat are more and more equalized in proportion as machinery obliterates all distinctions of labor and nearly every reduces wages to the same low level. The growing competition among the bourgeoisie and the resulting commercial crisis makes the wages of the workers even more fluctuating. The increasing improvement of machinery ever more rapidly developing, making their livelihood more and more precarious. The collisions between individual workmen and individual bourgeoisie take more and more the character of collisions between two classes. Thereupon, the workers begin to form a combination, in parentheses, trade unions, against the bourgeoisie. They club together in order to keep up the rate of wages. They found permanent associations in order to make provision beforehand for these occasional revolts. Here and there, the contest breaks out into riots. Holy crap, this is actually a lot, longer and, garbage than I thought it would be. Also, no Lemonhead, I will not stop reading the Communist Manifesto. This is very important to me. Throat hurts again. Now and then the workers are victorious, but only for a time. The real fruit of their battle lies not in the immediate result, but in ever-expanding union of the workers. This union is helped on by the improved means of communication that are created by modern industry and that place the workers of different localities in contact with one another. It was just this contact that was a struggle between classes, but every class struggle is a political struggle, and that union to attain which the burghers of the Middle Ages, with their miserable highways, required centuries. The modern proletarian, thanks to railways, achieved in a few years. The organization of the proletarians into a class, and consequently into a political party, is continually being upset again by competition between the workers themselves, but it ever rises again, stronger, firmer, mightier. It compels legislative recognition of particular interest of the workers by taking advantage of divisions among the bourgeoisie itself. Thus, the 10 hours bill in England was carried. Yeah, no, I'm going to stop reading after I finish this chapter. Holy crap, I'll split it into parts. Where was I? I already lost it. Altogether, collisions between the classes of old society further in many ways the course of development of a proletariat. The bourgeoisie finds itself involved with a constant battle, at first with the aristocracy, later on with those portions of the bourgeoisie itself whose interests have become antagonistic to the progress of industry, at all time with the bourgeoisie of foreign countries. In all these battles, it itself compelled to appeal to the proletariat, to ask for help, and thus to drag into a political arena. The bourgeoisie itself, therefore, supplies the proletariat with its own elements of political and general education. In other words, it furnishes the proletariat with the weapons for the fighting of the bourgeoisie. Further, as we have already seen, entire sections of the ruling class are, by the advance of industry, precipitated into the proletariat, or are at least threatened in their conditions of existence. These also supply the proletariat with fresh elements of enlightenment and progress. Finally, in times that the class struggle nears the decisive hours, the progress of dissolution going on within the ruling class, in fact, with the whole range of old society, assumes such a violent, glaring character. A small section of ruling class cuts itself adrift to join the revolutionary class, the class that holds the future in its hands, just as, therefore, at an earlier period, a section of nobility went over to the bourgeoisie, so now a portion of the bourgeoisie goes over to the proletariat. In particular, a portion of the bourgeoisie ideologists who have raised themselves to a level of comprehending the history of historical movement as a whole. I'm almost done with this chapter, guys, and I'm a yeet on out of this. This is making me hurt and sick. I think I got a notification on my phone. I should check this. Heck off, loser. Anyway. Of all the classes that stand face to face with the bourgeoisie today, the proletariat alone is a really revolutionary class. The other classes decay and finally disappear into the phase of modern industry. The proletariat is its special and essential product. The lower middle class, the small manufacturer, the shopkeeper, the artisan, the peasant, all these fight against the bourgeoisie to save from extinction of their existence as fractions of the middle class. They are therefore not revolutionary, but conservative. Nay more, they are reactionary, for they try to roll back the wheel of history. If by chance they are revolutionary, they are only so in the views of impending transfer into the proletariat. They thus defend not their present, but their future interests. They desert their own standpoint to place themselves of that of the proletariat. The dangerous class, the social soul, let's say the lumpen proletariat, the social scum, the passively rotting mass thrown off by the lowest layers of old society, may here and there be swept into a movement by a proletariat revolutions. In conditions life, however, prepare for far more part of a bribed tool of reactionary intrigue. In condition, the proletariat, those old of society at large, are already virtually swamped. The proletarian is without property. His relation to his wife and children has no longer anything in common with the bourgeoisie family relations. Modern industry, labor, modern subjugation to the capital, the same in England as in France, in America as in Germany, has stripped him of every trace of national character. Law, morality, religion are to him so many bourgeoisie prejudices, behind which lurk in ambush as many bourgeoisie interests. All the preceding classes that got the upper hand sought to fortify their already acquired status by subjecting society at large to a condition of appropriation. The proletarians cannot become masters of production forces of society except by abolishing their own previous mode of appropriation, and thereby also every person in the previous mode of appropriation. They have nothing of their own to secure, and to fortify their mission is to destroy all previous securities for and insurances of individual property. All previous historical movements were movements of minorities, or at least interests of minorities. The proletarian movement is the self-conscious, independent movement of the immense majority, and and in the interest of the immense majority. The proletariat, the lowest stratum of the present society, cannot stir, cannot raise itself up without the whole superincumbent strata of official society being sprung into the air. Though not in substance, yet in form, the struggle of the proletariat with all the bourgeoisie is its first national struggle. The proletariat of each country must, of course, first settle matters with its own bourgeoisie. In depicting the most general phases of the development of the proletariat, we trace the more or less violent civil war raging within existing society, up to the point where that war breaks out into open revolution, and where the violent overthrow of the bourgeoisie lays a foundation for the sway of the proletariat. In hetero, every form of society has been based, as we have already seen, on the antagonism of oppressing and oppressed classes, but in order to oppress a class, certain conditions must be assured to under which it can at least continue its slavish existence. The serf in the period of serfdom raised itself raised himself to membership in the commune, just as the petty bourgeoisie, under the yoke of feudal absolutism, managed to develop into a bourgeoisie. The modern laborer, on the contrary, instead of rising with the process of industry, sinks deeper and deeper below the conditions of existence of his own class. He becomes pauper, and the pauperism develops into more rapidly than population and wealth. And here it becomes evident. The bourgeoisie is unfit any longer to be the ruling class society and to impose its conditions of existence upon society as an overriding law. It is unfit to rule because the incompetence to assure an existence to its slave within his slavery because it cannot help letting him sink into such a state that it has to feed to him instead of being fed by him. Society can no longer live under this bourgeoisie. In other words, its existence is no longer compatible with society. The essential conditions of the existence and of the sway of the bourgeoisie class is the formation and augmentation of capital. The condition for capital is wage labor. Wage labor rests exclusively on the competition between the laborers. The advance of the industry, whose involuntary promoter is the bourgeoisie, replaces the isolation of the laborers due to competition by the revolutionary combination due to association. The development of modern industry, therefore, cuts from under its feet the very foundations on which the bourgeoisie produces and appropriates products. What the bourgeoisie therefore produces above all are its own gravediggers. Its fall and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable. And that is the end of chapter 1. And that is where I will stop this chapter of the live reading of the Communist Manifesto and pick up tomorrow or later. I don't know, depending on if I go to sleep or not. Thank you, and good night. Praise be, Hail Papa Stalin.